Привit and greetings from beautiful Budapest in Hungary. I'm here with the river Danube beside me, and that river flows all the way down into the Black Sea. Actually, flows out in Ukraine into the Black Sea. That's a pertinent point of reference for today's video. It's my reaction to Scott Ritter, because he's been, like many of the pundits who are pushing the Russian narrative since the beginning of this war. For reference, it's day 50 of Russia's war against Ukraine, new part of the war. And according to Scott Ritter, it would have been over by day 7, but this morning we learned that the Russian flagship in the Navy, Moskva, is badly damaged there. Mysterious how that happened, especially since, well, it's supposed to have been a war of only a few days, and we're on day 50. So River Danube flows out to the sea in Ukraine, and my thoughts are over there with the people who are suffering in Ukraine at the moment. And 50 days is definitely a remarkable amount of time that few predicted at the beginning of this war, and certainly not Scott Ritter. So let's get into my reaction. This is one that was requested. For me, Scott Ritter is kind of like the Douglas MacGregor 2.0. Since at the beginning of this war, Colonel Douglas MacGregor, I reacted to him up above in a card down below in the description. He was basically predicting the imminent collapse of the Ukrainian military every 24 to 48 hours, and it became every week. And yeah, he's still predicting it. But since very few people seem to be interviewing him anymore, another guy has come on the radar, Scott Ritter, and he basically says the same things, but I think in a more erudite and more intellectual way, and definitely seems to have a very good understanding of the Russian narrative in this war, especially the more hardcore elements of the Kremlin. He tends to very well be very good at describing exactly what they want in this war. So who is he, Scott Ritter? Well, he's American, who was an arms inspector during the lead up to the war in Iraq, America's invasion, and he was a big critic of the US's foreign policy and obviously that invasion. So kudos to him for that. And he, in the last couple of years, started writing a lot for RT, Russia Today, which is state-run media in Russia, so Russian propaganda channel. And now he is appearing almost several times a day, it seems, when I look on YouTube, on different channels, different people who in general are open to letting him push the Russian narrative of the war. Now, this is a war, there's propaganda on both sides, so it doesn't particularly bother me that he just repeats what I can already read in the RIA Novosti articles or interviews with advisors to Putin. And what is interesting is, and why it gets brought to my attention and why viewers wanted me to react, is that he has a different point of view to me about the war. I've already called the war. I called it after 1 month, around day 50, so I guess it's over about 20 days ago that I called the war for Ukraine. Very bright today, as you can see. Hence I've got the shades on. Got Bucha and the castle over there. I got the parliament on the Pest side here as we walk along. So he has a different opinion to me, and he's basically, I watched a couple of interviews with him in the last 2 to 3 days, and let's go and see what he says is going to happen in Ukraine, and then I'll react to it and I'll show you what he was also saying on day 1 and whether his opinion should be relied on or not.
SAR Experience.
So this first clip is from day 48 of the war, so 2 days ago. I'm going to put the clips, the links to them down below in the description. You can watch the whole thing if you want yourself afterwards. But if you put his name into YouTube, you're going to get so many interviews in the last week or so. So let's see what he was saying 2 days ago.
Russia sent between 40 and 50,000 troops out of Belarus towards Kyiv. Kyiv is a city of 3.1 million people. And I don't think there's a military expert alive who thinks that 40 to 50,000 people can capture and occupy a city of 3.1 million. Keeping in mind also that Ukraine had several of its best military formations operating in and around Kyiv. So it's not that Russia would be walking into a defenseless city. They'd have to fight through these critical military formations. So I think right off the bat, we can say that Russia had no intention of capturing Kyiv.
So there, he says that basically, well, the Russians never intended to capture Kyiv. They didn't put enough troops there. And this whole idea that Russia was looking for a quick victory is not true. Remember that, because we're going to go back and see what Scott Ritter was saying on day one of the war in a little bit. So what happened is that Russia, after a couple of weeks of failing to capture Kyiv, because one of their objectives was to replace the government with a puppet government, in the sense that they claimed they were going for, Putin claimed, a denazification of the leadership of Ukraine. And from the very beginning, the first 48 hours of the war, they landed troops in Kyiv itself. Now, the whole idea that, well, they were never trying to take Kyiv sounds a bit implausible, considering how many resources relative to the total resource they actually pushed there, and how hard they fought, and the casualties they ensued. And yeah, we're now on day 50, and their official strategic objectives may have changed, but that's not really what it looks like. Anyways, let's go on and see what else Scott Ritter says, just briefly.
So did Russia get defeated in Kyiv? No. The simple answer is no. Russia accomplished everything it wanted to.
So there he says they got everything they want. Well, they want to replace the government. So that's obviously not the case. President Zelensky is still in power and he's still in Kyiv. Klitschko is the mayor of Kyiv. He's still there. They don't, the political leadership is still there. So no, they didn't achieve what they want. That's just patently not plausible if you look at what they were looking for in the beginning.
But you know what they can't show off? They can't show any of the Ukrainian forces that were in Kyiv fighting on the Eastern Front in Donbass, which was the Russian objective all along. And now Russia's getting ready to launch phase 2. And I think we're about to see the wisdom of the Russian strategic decision to shape the battlefield in the way that they did.
All right, so he's claiming that it was all kind of like a big feint to go and attack Kyiv, and actually just wanted to pin down the Ukrainian forces there. And now we're going to see on day 50 the wisdom of Russia's plan. A big feint where they sent that many troops that got destroyed and used up that much amount of time and energy so they could be in a better position at Donbass. Well, I'm not the military expert, but it just doesn't make any sense to me so far. It looks like a rationalization for what's, a failure. But let's go on and see on a video he did yesterday.
Russia is serious. Putin doesn't bluff. And I'm not saying that we should kowtow to him, bow low to him, but we have to recognize the reality of what Russia's asking for, which is for NATO to go back to its 1997 borders. That doesn't mean that nations that join NATO after that leave NATO. It just means that you can't have non-national troops. If you're in Poland, you can't have German troops in Poland, American troops in Poland. If you're in the Baltics, you can't have French and German troops. They all have to go home, and you have to get rid of the ballistic missile facilities that you put in Poland and Romania, and you have to create a buffer of stability between NATO and Russia.
So there he outlines basically the Russian position and what they're trying to achieve, that very many people really understood, I think, before the war, but that's actually more accurate. That's actually what they've been demanding since December. It's widely optimistic that that's what the West would agree to. And I guess in his line of thinking, since he claims that he even has a thought that Russia will win the war, that he thinks they'll be in a position to start demanding that afterwards. But at least that's accurate. That is actually as crazy demands as that they really want to go back to 1997 situation with NATO. There's no indication that Scott Ritter has ever been to Ukraine in any of the interviews I've seen. Maybe that's wrong. He has been to Russia. He lived in Russia. He describes that at the end was actually the Soviet Union still, if I understand correctly. But he doesn't seem to really understand anything about what's happening domestically in Ukraine. He just thinks, well, Russia's going to win, and then they will make these demands and the West will have to capitulate.
The Ukrainian National Police went through Bucha and murdered people, murdered them, shot them down the streets. Some of these people had their hands tied behind their back and were shot in the back execution style. This was not a staged event. What happened is Ukrainians realized that they had a PR problem, and so they shifted the narrative.
So there he gives an alternative narrative on the events in Bucha, where a large number of Ukrainians were massacred, and he claims it was the Ukrainians who did it. That's basically the Russian reaction, the typical modus operandi when this happens is they do two things at the same time. They say it's fake, all those images are fake, no one was killed, it's actors. And then at the same time, you have another part of their propaganda that says it was the Ukrainians. It's always the Ukrainians. No matter what happens, both is fake, never happened, and it's the Ukrainians who did it. So there he just gives that narrative.
If we just keep shipping billions in military equipment there, and Putin just keeps sending, thousands more conscripts and generals of great military experience, call him a butcher, but he certainly knows how to command troops. How does this end?
Well, first of all, I take umbrage at the notion that they're sending thousands of conscripts. Again, that's a Western narrative designed to create an impression inside Russia of impending Russian military defeat. Let me make this clear. Russia is winning this war and winning this war decisively and winning this war on a timeline dictated by Russia. Putin just gave a speech the other night where he said, our troops, we're not worried about the West's timeline. We are carrying out what he called a very literal war. That means by the book, by the numbers, designed to reduce Russian casualties and inflict maximum casualties on the Ukrainians. Just yesterday, we had 1,000 Ukrainian Marines surrender. Prior to that, it was 200. In the days to come, you're going to see 5,000, 10,000 Ukrainian troops surrender at a time because they're caught up in a cauldron. They can't escape.
Okay, so there he claims that Russia's winning decisively on its own timeline. It's day 50, man. The timeline was 50 days to have taken, let's see, Kherson, the water source for Crimea at Novokhovka, and they still haven't taken Mariupol. And remember that, because we're going to play what he said on day one. And then he's predicting that thousands, he's 5,000 Ukrainians will start surrendering per day in a couple of days. So he said that already on, well, actually, it was just yesterday, 49. So I'm expecting on day 50, 51, 52 to say 5,000, 10,000 Ukrainians on camera surrendering. Well, still haven't seen them happen. Let's see. We'll give them another 2 days before we'll call BS on that as well, because I just don't see how that's happening. There aren't even that number of Ukrainian fighters in Mariupol to surrender. It would have to be in Donbass. And the Russians have made so little progress on the battlefield there. I just don't see how they're surrendering 5,000, 10,000. And yeah, he's basically just a big cheerleader for whatever Russia is doing. He's repeating their main talking points, which is fine. I mean, there's a hungry audience for the Russian point of view in Western, on things like YouTube, clearly because a lot of people watch him, a lot of people send them to me, but not very much seems to be grounded in what's actually happening on the battlefield in Ukraine. I believed in the beginning all this hype about how Russia would decimate the Ukrainian army and that basically Ukraine's only chance would be a partisan war over the long term. But we are on day 50, and as I said, they haven't made much progress on the battlefield since day 20. Actually, if you look at the map since day 20, on basically every day almost they've lost more territory than they've gained, the Russians. So obviously in the first 20 days they gained quite a lot. Well, not really relative to the size of the country, but they made all their gains in the first 20 days, and slowly that has been chipped away, and not so slow in the north in Kyiv. So basically he is rationalizing any sort of setback for the Russians, putting a spin on it. And that's important in a war, right, to have this kind of propaganda, because everybody wants to believe their side is going to win. But he's speaking to an international audience. It's not for a Russian domestic audience as far as I can see. And what would be the purpose of that? Well, if you follow his narrative, which is almost carbon copy of Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who's still anticipating an imminent collapse of the entire Ukrainian military. Every day it's going to happen. They claim you shouldn't support the Ukrainians because they're going to lose, Russia's going to win, and basically if you arm Ukraine, you're just prolonging all the pain, all the destruction, because they're going to lose anyways, and you shouldn't support them because it's not noble to support a country that Russia's basically trying to eliminate in terms of its own independence. In another video, I'll go into the whole debate about whether there's a genocide or not taking place in Ukraine. So anyways, that's the purpose of it. So they want to weaken support in the West, because obviously if the West keeps supplying arms and weapons, well, it makes it harder for Russia to win. That's pretty obvious, right? So is he right or is he wrong, right? It's not very convincing so far. And let's look at his track record. Let's just go to day one of the war. And let's see what he said when it all started in the first few hours.
We've already have reports of Russian troops taking the city of Mariupol. It's supposed to be the hardest fought. That's where the Azov battalion is. Less than an hour, the city fell.
Hold on a sec. On day one, he said they've taken Mariupol. It's day 50, Scott. They still don't control Mariupol. So that is, yeah, that's a bit embarrassing.
Russian troops have landed in Odessa. Russian tanks are pouring out of Crimea and pouring down towards Kharkov, and it's all over. I mean, this is a massive operation.
So there he says on day 1 it's all over. But Hannah says, Scott, on day 48 and 49, you're saying it's all part of the ground plan and Russia's timing 50 days later. So if it was all over on day 1, doesn't make any sense. And he says Mariupol fell within an hour. Within an hour, and there were Russian troops in Odessa. Actually, that was disinformation from, I guess, the Russian side, because it's important in war to make people scared that the country is about to be overrun, because then you want the country invading their soldiers to surrender and think it's pointless resisting. Right? I understand that. So they put out all this information that they were already in Odessa. They did bomb parts of the city on that first day, but they didn't actually get troops into the center of Odessa, and they still haven't on day 50. Mariupol, obviously they did surround and start attacking. It was actually where they started the bombardments. Kyiv also, they did attack on that first day. We've already seen that they retreated after not winning there.
The Ukrainian military is not up to the task. Right now, I feel bad for these guys because they've been led to believe that they can fight the Russians. They've had NATO trainers there. They've received, so-called lethal weapons. Those lethal weapons were in warehouses. Those warehouses are destroyed right now.
Yeah, he says all their weapons are basically destroyed. Obviously, that's not true. We can see over the last 50 days what's happened. They've actually, not only were their weapons not destroyed, they got a hell of a lot more of them, and now they keep getting reinforced with heavier and heavier weapons. So that's completely wrong. Let's go ahead and see, how he was feeling about what was happening.
I was just about to show clips of explosions in Kiev or Kyiv, however it's pronounced. I've
been pronounced Kiev from now on.
So there, that kind of shows you his attitude, right? So there he's talking about whether to pronounce the city Kiev or Kyiv. Kyiv would be Ukrainian pronunciation, but actually normally comes down which way you spell it. Kyiv is the official name, Ukrainian transliteration, and Kyiv would be Russian Kyiv. And there you see how happy he is to say, oh, those people aren't going to get to speak their language anymore. You can see how hostile he is to the idea of Ukrainians even existing. So that shows his mentality. He's gung-ho about the destruction of the idea of a Ukraine. And he goes into that in more detail. This guy is on a channel, Richard Medhurst. And let's see what else he says on day 1.
This is a Russian operation. We in the West can sit back there and shake our heads, wag our fingers. It doesn't matter. The reality is made by Russia, and that reality is transpiring on the ground right now. Afterwards, we can dissect it and criticize it, et cetera. But, right now, I just let the facts speak for themselves. And the facts are Russia is overrunning Ukraine as we speak.
So there you go. The facts speak for themselves. Well, they do, Scott, and it obviously wasn't overrun because it's day 50. And up until day 20, Russia kept gaining territory, and now they've been gradually losing it. Of course, that can also be reversed. I understand that, but obviously it was not overrun. This guy is just, I guess he's so imbued by Russian propaganda that he's spewing out, that he's so happy, yes, they're going to destroy the Ukrainians, that he gets completely carried away in his predictions and his assessments going on.
The reality of Ukraine as we knew it, and I've warned about this all along, I said, if Ukraine doesn't understand what's about to happen to it, it's going to cease to exist as a modern nation state as it's currently configured. And that's true. It's done. And so, Russia is defining the Slavic borders. And we may see some action with the Transnistria region in Moldova now that Russia is going to expand to into Ukraine. There are some I think there's some shared borders there, and that may become part of the greater Slavic family as well.
There you can see how he's basically laughing about the idea that they invaded Ukraine. They're going to destroy Ukraine as a nation state, create this Slavic nation, I guess, idea of a nation state, but basically have a rump Russian-controlled vassal. And he says also that's what Belarus, and he's super excited, but he's pumped about it. He can't wait to see those Ukrainians crushed he seems to have a great hatred for him. I don't know what happened. I mean, maybe he got scammed by some Ukrainian scammer girl online. I don't know what happened in why he would hate Ukrainians so much. And then he talks about Transnistria and going and grabbing more territory, because I made a video talking about where Russia would attack next. And that's what I said. They would take Transnistria and go into Moldova. Scott Ritter's saying the exact same thing because he's so proud of it to see it happen, right? So, wow. Amazing to watch this.
I was talking about this before, that the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, NATO's original purpose, stated or otherwise, is kind of defunct now.
So there we have the host chime in, who seems I don't know how to describe him. He thinks that the raison d'etre of NATO is now defunct after Russia invaded Ukraine and proved why NATO has a reason to exist, is to protect against the expansionist Russia, a revanchist autocracy called Russia, right? When it was the Soviet Union, it was also, it wasn't maybe a revanchist in that sense, it was just like an expansionist imperial autocracy, and now it is a revanchist autocracy. And actually all those excuses that NATO is expanding, trying to grab all this territory, you're not looking at it the right way if you still believe like that. This commentator seems to believe it's that the countries close to Russia were fearing this day for the last 30 years, where Russia would start to grab. And this didn't actually happen. It happened in 2014 when they annexed Crimea and started the war in Donbass. But this is the big war, right? The final piece of proof that Russia will one day be strong again and go and try and take back all of the former Soviet Union to start with. And Scott Ritter's even gung-ho about it, right? So what has happened with NATO since day one? Well, it's definitely a lot more unified, and Sweden and Finland are now talking about fast-tracking joining. So it's going to expand again. Yeah, the countries around it don't want to be invaded by Russia. That's why NATO expands. I'm not a fan of NATO as Europe's security architecture, but I can hardly argue with it if Russia keeps saying that it has a right to invade its neighbors. That's just the bottom line. And they're not willing to rely on the other Europeans to come and save them, so they need the Americans to be there. They need the foreign troops. That's why this whole argument makes no sense. It's just one to talk about how Russia has a right to invade its neighbors. And Scott Ritter is down with it, as long as this clueless host. You know, back in December in Kharkiv, I'll put it up above and down below. I talked about this when I met the former Estonian president. He told me, Mary Leonard, exactly why he pushed for Estonia to join NATO was because he told me one day Russia will be strong again and it will invade every part of the former Soviet Union that doesn't do what it says and is not in NATO. And it's just been proven true. So anyways, clueless.
I think that this military operation is going to be over in less than a week.
Wow. He thinks it's going to be over in less than a week.
I think it's going to be one of the most decisive military victories in the history of modern warfare.
Why do you think that?
Because the Ukrainian army can't fight and the Russian army is vastly superior. The Russians have a plan, they're acting on it, and it's unfolding at lightning speed.
Hold on a sec, Scott. On day 48 and 49, you're saying the plan is like the timing of Russia's convenience or something like that. I'm paraphrasing him now. It's all going according to plan, the Russian plan. But he's saying it's going to be lightning speed done within a week because the Ukrainians can't fight. This guy, on this point, is terrible. He's even rivaling Colonel Doug McGregor for just being so wrong. The guy has no idea.
You know, so this is going to be over in less than a week. That's my opinion. Now, you can call me back in a week when the Russian army's bogged down outside of Dnipropetrovsk and the Ukrainians have launched valiant counterattacks surrounding the 20th Combined Arms Army, taking thousands of Russian prisoners. Okay, then I'll eat my tie.
Already, he's going to eat his tie. Well, he doesn't seem to wear ties in his interview, so I guess he gets away with that. Near Dnipropetrovsk, fine, okay, that's the old name of the city, but Dnipro, the city, well, they still haven't gotten there and it's day 50. So, yeah, I guess you need to eat that tie, Scott, and you're more than welcome to come on my channel and eat it and have a discussion while you eat it. I'm open to having him on and seeing how he tries to defend his predictions.
Tsar Experience.
So there you go, that's Scott Ritter and his predictions from day 1 versus day 48 and 49. You can just call complete BS on his ability to predict what's been happening militarily. I already called the war on day 30, and things have been going that direction. And I'm not a military expert. I never even say, listen to me, but reading between the lines and what I see in the media with my background in international relations and just looking for receipts. All he is doing clearly is taking whatever the Russian propaganda line and just spewing it. And he says it quite eloquently, a lot of things, and a lot of passion, a lot of conviction. So it sounds probably to people who are not so knowledgeable or able to look at a map or to go back or don't go back and look what he was saying in day one, like he knows what he's talking about. But clearly his record on predicting this conflict, this war, has been an F. He shows just so much hatred and disdain and vitriol for the idea of Ukrainians as a people. And he's completely thinks that it's justified to effectively eliminate them as a nation state. And, you know, I'll do the other video about whether there's a genocide taking place or not going forward. Look out for it in the channel. I think it's a more complicated topic to get into, but I don't understand where this hatred comes from. It just seems like it resonates a lot what I see with those from the far left who support this invasion, either openly or they say they want a peace agreement and Ukraine should just surrender because it's hopeless. I want peace. What they want is Putin to win. Let's be very clear about it. At least he's openly saying that. But yeah, it's almost like they want the West to get the West, even though it's actually going to be Ukrainians getting killed in large numbers. They want the West to get a black eye or a bloody nose so much that they're willing to support an imperialistic invasion to crush an independent country and in the process kill thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands already probably. Even if he doesn't care for the Ukrainians and the people, which seems quite clear from his attitude, the fact there's probably somewhere around 15,000 Russian soldiers dead should make him think about, is this worth it? To create some sort of new Slavic empire that it doesn't seem like too many people really support when it comes down to it. At least it isn't much support in Ukraine for what I've been seeing. So in short, Scott Ritter, he's just Colonel Doug Macgregor 2.0, more evolved, more knowledgeable, and more eloquent version of him, and probably more passionate, which is why he's become so popular to have on as a guest on just about every podcast that is, you know, open to supporting Russia's narrative in this war. But in terms of predicting what has happened so far, he's absolutely appalling, just as bad as Colonel Macgregor. And should we listen to him about 5,000, 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers starting per day to surrender because it's pointless, they're about to lose in the coming days? I don't think so. But, you know, we can look at this video by, say, day 55. And if it started to happen, then it started to happen. But would I put any trust in him? Absolutely zero. He's just feeding a hungry audience that still wants to believe in this mighty Russian army and that will crush the Ukrainians in a couple of days. And now they need to rationalize it why on day 50 they're actually further away from that goal than they were on day 20, never mind on day 3. So that's my reaction to Scott Ritter, and let's see what Scott Ritter is saying by the May 9th, how it's a great victory and what is the real situation on the battlefield at that stage and where the Russians lie in this war. It's a beautiful evening here on the banks of the river Danube. My heart goes out to everybody who is still in Ukraine suffering this appalling, inhumane and unjustified war. And I will see you in the next video. Do побачення. Slava Ukraini. That's going to piss off Scott Ritter hearing those words that people on day 50 of the war can still say because Ukraine still exists, something that he despises, from what I can see anyways, from the very knot of his stomach. Harom Slava.
SAR Experience.